So today our theme is self-transcendence, and I'd like to start out by reading something that Sri Chinmoy wrote about self-transcendence. So this is interesting because it's a fully realized spiritual master's take on today's theme. Here we go. Transcendence is perfection. Perfection is transcendence. When we transcend our capacities, immediately we get an inner joy, an inner thrill, which is another name for perfection. No perfection can ever be achieved without self-transcendence. There we go.
Wonderful. So that's a good place to kick off from, I think.
I think so, yeah.
So what does self-transcendence mean to you, though, personally? How do you relate to the idea of self-transcendence?
Yeah, I would say that self-transcendence means to go beyond our preconceived limitations. And this can be on any plane of consciousness. So it can be physical, mental, spiritual. And so we have lots of limitations, let's say, in our nature. We can have mental limitations, we can have doubts, we can have fears, anxieties, worries, and we can transcend those. So we can conquer these qualities. We can replace our anxiety by peace, and we can replace our worry or our, let's say, our insecurity by self-confidence. And these are all examples of transcendence, which I feel in a spiritual practice, that's what's happening all the time. You're constantly transcending yourself and becoming a better version of yourself. But then you can also do it, transcend yourself in a very physical way. So, for instance, when you start a running practice and you do your first 5K run, and you're able to run for 5K, and then you go do a 10K, then you do a half marathon, and eventually you do the full marathon. And you've transcended yourself because you have done something which previously you were incapable of. So to me, it's a journey, self-transcendence. It's a journey where you are first accepting your limitations, and then you're setting the bar just right for yourself and plotting out a strategy in order to increase your capacities so that you can transcend this limitation and conquer it. And then you have reset your borders. Let's say you have reset your limitations, and then you're a new person in a sense.
Yeah, you're a slightly expanded version of yourself.
Exactly. Yes. And that is another thing that I came across in Sri Chinmoy's writings, where he says self-transcendence means self-expansion in every way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful.
What is your take on self-transcendence?
Well, I mean, I very much agree with you that it's all of those things. It's expanding ourselves, going beyond what we thought, beyond our capacities, going beyond our limitations. But I also, I quite like to think about it as you're exploring at the boundary of yourself. So it's like an adventurous state to be in, this state of self-transcendence, because you're at the boundary between the known, what you've done before, what you've seen, experienced before, and the unknown. And so it's a really interesting sort of nebulous boundary area, because it's not really clear where the edge of yourself is. We tend to obviously often identify with our body, but when it comes to our abilities or our capacities or our the power we have to go and learn things, develop ourselves, expand, it's not really clear that there is any boundaries in that space.
So when you talk about the known and the unknown, what do you mean by that?
Well, there's the parts of yourself that you already know. It's the things you've experienced. It's your capacities. It's your abilities that you've already shown to the world or shown to yourself. But there's always some part more to you than you yourself know. And that's the really interesting part of the spiritual game. When you start exploring, like, what does it really mean to be me? And what actually am I? Because we've got a picture of ourselves, but it's highly inaccurate and completely, it's totally incomplete. And so self-transcendence is exploring in that realm of the unknown and starting to realize that there is more to us. There is more capacity than we've perhaps
So
experienced.
you're kind of moving from a low resolution image of yourself to a higher resolution image.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting if we go back and look at two. You know me and my models of the universe. I love building models of the universe. But
three. I know I've counted three so far. Are there more to come?
so this is quite an interesting thing to think about. So, like, if we look back over centuries, there've really been in some ways two approaches to the material world. I'm going to simplify things into two approaches, let's say. So there was hedonism on one hand and asceticism on the other hand. And so hedonism is obviously indulging in all the desires and the pleasures of the earthly world. And you see that really being acted out very strongly in our culture today, where as people begin to have less and less belief in something spiritual or transcendent, they begin to fall down and revert to the physical world and the material world to find all of their joy and all of the meaning in life. So we kind of all know what that looks like, like just trying to experience all of the pleasures of the earthly life. Asceticism, on the other hand, was this very, very ancient idea. So there was really hardcore ascetics thousands and thousands of years ago who were practicing the path of self-denial. So they were denying all of the bodily desires and denying what they claimed were all of the worldly pleasures. So when the Buddha became interested in his own spiritual journey, that was the path he immediately gravitated to, because he found these forest dwelling ascetics and he followed their way. And I think it was for 6 years he followed that path. And so for periods of time, he was not eating at all. He was eating one sesame seed or one grain of rice per day. So it's really the path of the negation of the physical body. And that was a commonly held belief that if you wanted to transcend yourself, if you wanted to go beyond and have these deeper states of experience, that you needed to transcend the physical body. But they would try and do it by negating or destroying this type of severe, austere approach to life.
Yes,
So,
there's a statue of the Buddha where he's completely emaciated. Like you see
yes.
him and all his ribs are showing. That's like at the height of his ascetic journey.
Yeah, exactly. And at some point, the Buddha realized that that was actually not the way. And so he reverted to what he called the middle path. So neither diving
You,
into all of the pleasures of the world or denying all of the earthly needs for food and sleep and all of
do you
those
know the
things.
trigger? What triggered him to
What
adopt
what
that
was
belief?
what was the exact moment there?
Yeah, so apparently I think there's different versions of the story, but apparently there was a boat coming by the river where he was meditating on the banks of this river, and he saw in the boat were two musicians, and there was a teacher and a student, and the teacher was explaining to the student that he should tune the instrument just right, not tune the string too high, too tight, because then it would break. But if he would put the string too low, it would not produce any sound. So the string had to be just just tightened just right. And so the Buddha realized, oh, I am at the moment the string that is too tight. On the other hand, the path of indulgence is when you tighten it too low, there's no sound. So it has to be just in the middle, just right. Then it can produce music.
Yeah, and I think what that situation reveals to us is very often we make the wrong diagnosis of the problem. And so in that situation, humanity or the people who were looking to have these experiences, they thought the problem was the physical body. And so they blamed all of the problems on the physical body. And so they attempted to get beyond the physical body by really torturing the physical body. But that I think that misses the whole point, that really the source of all of our own troubles is actually in our own mind. It's the way we approach and the way we cling to or grasp for or the way we think about the world. So the world in its inherent state does not have a meaning. It's up to us to put a meaning into the world. And so that's really what we are in some way, a meaning making machine.
Hmm.
Um, and so we are the ones creating problems, because the thing is, if you eat a delicious meal, the normal and natural response is to enjoy it. So that's not indulging in hedonism. That's not like indulging in gluttony and having these, outrageous feasts and banquets and, having all sorts of, wild tastes and flavors. If you just sit down with your friends and enjoy and eat a delicious meal, you should enjoy that experience, because that is the right and natural response to sharing good food with good people. And so I think that's the danger, that when we start getting into the space of self-denial, we start to take the negative approach to the world. So we start to try and negate the good and the beautiful things around us.
But
And
there is also a spiritual path of negation, isn't there? The neti neti path,
yeah,
Indiana path.
Well, I think that that's not a physical negation of the world. It's a subtle, it's a more on a more subtle level. It's realizing that none of this is really truly real. but but it's like you have a natural reaction to things when you see a beautiful sight, like, so you see a beautiful sunset. You shouldn't tell yourself, oh, I should not enjoy this, because that is just indulging in the pleasures of the physical world. It's like,
Yeah,
it's
or it's not even real. So,
yeah, it's like,
not
it's
even real.
there's a moment, and there's a normal and natural and proper response to things in the world. When you see some daffodils, it's springtime here in New York now, and I was at Central Park yesterday, and there's all these daffodils coming up, and to look at them and to see them and say, oh, these are completely unreal, and I shouldn't even enjoy them, because that's indulging in the physical world. That's just
Yeah.
a ridiculous approach to life, and it's going to really take away all of your own joy.
I think if you if you choose a very extreme side like asceticism,
Yes.
anything that kind of veers away from that path is seen as a fall from the path. It's
Yeah.
like whenever you are out of your asceticism
Yeah.
role, you feel that everything is pure indulgence.
Yeah.
Whereas you realize that it's like the indulgence is very far away from you. It's the other
Yeah.
extreme. And so there's a whole middle path to be explored
Yeah.
there.
And the danger is that you can indulge in asceticism, where you can be doing that. You can be doing all of this self denial to prove that you're better than everyone else.
Yes.
And that's a very dangerous thing, because it becomes like a way of you creating virtue through suffering. And so you embrace the showing how much suffering you can endure.
Yes.
And yeah, I
Kind of
remember
the,
listening to a speaker on Buddhism, on Zen Buddhism, and he was saying that many of the other Zen Buddhists were always so proud of how many hours they would sit in zazen and seated meditation, and how sore their legs were, and how much pain they went through. And he felt as though in some way that they were indulging in this ascetic denial of the body, and the suffering
yes.
that they were causing.
So I've read somewhere that there are temptations for the earthly man, there are also temptations for the heavenly man, for the spirit.
Oh,
And those temptations are in the realm of asceticism, of renouncing the world,
yeah,
and yeah, it's very tempting to take that into an extreme. And it's also a play of ego, right? The ego
yeah,
clings to whatever role that you adopt. So if you are adopting yourself as a renunciate or an ascetic, then your ego will also take some value from that kind of picture and that role. And that can be ultimately also a danger. So I
yeah,
also subscribe to the middle path very much so.
yeah. So like what I wanted to reach with that idea. So we've got hedonism at one extreme, and we've got asceticism at the other extreme. And where I think self transcendence falls on that spectrum is right in front of us, like one step, or 1 inch in front of where we are. So if we're trying to follow a middle path, so we're not going to either extremes, self transcendence is the calling to take one step beyond where we are now. So self transcendence is always one step beyond where we currently are. It's always calling us to grow and to make progress and to expand ourselves. And so I think as well, it's a wonderfully positive approach to the problems of the material world. So it's not negating them and denying the world, but instead it's embracing the world and using it as a way to make progress, to a way to grow and to transform ourselves. And you can do really difficult things through the path of self transcendence, but you're not doing them to indulge in the suffering of the experience. So many people know that our community is well known for these amazing ultra day, multi-day ultra running events that we put on. And so that would be for me like a really positive approach to dealing with the limitations of the human body, and trying to transcend, but through a positive approach rather than a negative approach.
Yeah, and if we think of the thing that I just read out in the beginning, it's every time we transcend ourselves, we get an inner joy, an inner
Yeah,
thrill. So whenever you get an inner joy, whenever you really transcend, there is joy connected to it, and not suffering and hardship and like the things that you often associate with asceticism. Like to
yeah,
me, there's no real joy there. It is just a hardship and kind of enduring. But I've done 2 ultras in my life, and although it is hardship, it is very hard, and that you definitely suffer from a purely physical perspective. There's also a lot of joy to be experienced. It's like I really felt tremendous joy during the race and also after the race. And also when I did my first marathon, I remember that there was just so much joy in that experience, even though it was painful at times from a physical standpoint. But just the idea that you go so much beyond your limitations and you see a new side, you see yourself expanding literally because you're venturing into a realm that was previously unknown. And now you're there and you're okay. You can handle it. And then I think that's also where growth comes from. When you realize, hey, I've just expanded myself. I'm now a marathon runner. I now view myself as a marathon runner. I've done a marathon. And yeah, previously I did not think of myself in that way. And now I've proved it to myself.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of joy connecting to that because it's expanding yourself.
Yeah, and in some ways, it's transforming the story of ourselves. And so, as we've talked before, stories are so fundamental to the way we experience the world. So, if you can do things that change and transform your story in a positive way, and you grow and you learn from it, that's such a powerful idea. And I think often, if I think about people in general in the world, we don't choose what grips us, what really interests us, what really captures our attention. And I think that this is the deepest part of our being, is constantly looking out into the world and seeing opportunities for us to grow and to transform and to learn lessons that we need to. And for example, if I work in the space of running coaching, and so I'll get athletes coming to me and they say they want to run a 100-mile race. And I could say to them, well, why do you think you want to run 100 miles? And they'll try and justify it, and they'll make some sort of reasoned approach. But what I think really happens on some deeper fundamental level is they have seen other people who have done that thing. And they've seen the way that it called out the best in the other person. It caused the other person to have to transform themselves. So they had to become more disciplined. They had to become more courageous. They had to become more determined. And so some deeper part of them resonates with that and thinks, oh my God, like this is what I need. I need to develop these qualities. I need to express and discover these qualities within myself. So it draws you, it pulls you towards that activity. And it doesn't have to be ultra marathoning. It could be anything that is causing and pulling you towards being a better version of yourself. But it's quite interesting to think about the things that really have gripped you in your life and really inspired you or really called to you, and really what was it about those things, because we try and rationalize it often after the fact, but I think there's some deeper pull that takes us towards those things.
Yeah, it's as if your soul knows that there's a lesson there for you to learn.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good to tell my story of my personal self transcendence in a very practical way.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
as you know, I was at one time the holder of several Guinness World Records.
You were a world record holder. That
I
I'm
was,
honored
believe it or
honored to be
not.
on the same podcast with
Uh,
you. It's
well,
amazing.
anyway, I there was a time in my life when it was a serious hobby of mine to break Guinness World Records, and it's interesting because, well, as a backstory, so I think our path in the Sri Chinmoy Center, we are kind of raised in a spirit of self-transcendence, right? I mean, if we look at our teacher, he was such an emblem of self-transcendence in every way. Like in every sphere, he was going beyond himself. So he became a poet, but then he became, he produced so many poems. He wrote hundreds and thousands of volumes of poetry. So he became a painter. He started creating hundreds and thousands of paintings. So it was not only the quality, but also the quantity. And this was in a very physical way. He was transcending himself. He was just going full speed. And then he became a weightlifter as well, and which is very unusual for a spiritual master to lift weights. And anyway, I'm cutting the story a little short here because I'm going to come back to my self transcending experience of the Guinness World Record. So we, Sri Chinmoy, in the early 80s, founded an event which is called Impossibility Challenger, which is a record-breaking festival, basically, that invites people from all over the world to break a record in any field. And the idea, of course, here is to give a podium to the concept of self-transcendence in a very physical way. So people would come and they would do what we now call Guinness World Records. They would do endurance events or other events, speed events. And we continued this event for several years. And I was at one point the organizer. In 2016, I organized one that we held in Berlin. In our
So what would you give us some examples of the type of records that people would do?
Yeah,
What are
so
some
there
ones
was a
that are
guy who,
interesting?
for instance, was I just have to think about the things. Yeah, people who were like bending nails with their hands, like the strongman records,
Hmm.
or people who were throwing logs over a large distance. But there were also people who were creating these really tiny little boats that they called micro ships. So out of like origami paper, and it was like the smallest boat ever created.
Wow.
Things like you couldn't. It's like really funny things sometimes, weird things. I think there were like juggling records. There were like football records where people would kick the football or the hacky sack as many times as possible.
Yeah.
And so
So it's
there were
very
also
varied, a huge
very,
variety
very.
of different things.
There was a person from our center, Mahiruha, who was reciting the most poems by heart, and he did a series that Sri Chinmoy wrote of 1,000 poems. So I literally witnessed him. I mean, I wasn't there for the whole thing; it took hours, but he recited 1,000 poems by heart.
Yeah, that is
It's
amazing.
incredible. And then there's another gentleman from our center, Charuhashi, who did that previously, and he recited several thousands of short poems.
Hmm.
And so memory records, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so when I organized that festival in 2016, I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I, as an organizer, would also try a record? And so I started browsing the Guinness World Records website, and I saw that there was a record there um, that was connected to one-handed clapping.
So hang on a second. So there is a record for one-handed clapping. So there's ancient Zen koan by Hakuin of what is the sound of one hand clapping. You were attempting to create that sound or to
So let me
demonstrate it to the world.
Yes, exactly. So I know this amazing party trick, which is clapping with one hand. And so to solve the Zen koan, what
Yes.
I would say to demonstrate it is this. So this is me
So this
solving the Zen koan.
this is
Do it with two hands.
this is the sound of one hand clapping.
This is the sound of one hand clapping. So
Wow.
all you Zen Buddhists, pay attention. You know, this
Yes.
is what you have to show your master when he next
Yeah.
presents you the koan. So
Yes.
I came across this fantastic record of one-handed clapping, and I know that I knew that I had that skill. So when I was a
Yeah.
10-year-old, I once discovered that I could clap in one hand.
Yeah.
I saw a comedy show on TV, and the actor was doing this thing, and
Yeah.
I tried it myself, and I said, "Hey, I can do that," and it's kind of
Yeah.
a fun, like a party trick. So I saw that there was a record with one-handed clapping, and I thought this is perfect. You know, let me just try this record. And there was a 14-year-old kid from America who held the current record. It was like 400 times in a minute.
Come on, you've got to be able to beat a 14-year-old kid, don't
That's what I
you?
thought. That was my thought exactly. So anyway, it was about how many can you do in a minute, and so I started really to train for it
So
because
the
it's not
record
like
was what was the record when you went for it?
I think the record was something like 420 in 1 minute, which is like six times per second.
120 one-handed
Yeah,
claps in 1 minute.
which is exactly 7 per second. Yeah, 60
Oh my
times seven. Yeah,
God.
so it was something like that, and I don't know. It was less actually. It was 405, something like
Yeah.
that. Anyway. I started training, and it took me a long time to kind of get up to speed that I could kind of do do the necessary speed for 10 seconds. Like
Mm.
I could do it for 10 seconds and then my shoulder would like hurt because
Yeah.
you're actually, so and I started training and training and weeks went into months, and at some point I reached the point where I thought, okay, now I'm there. Do I can do it. I can do it in 1 minute.
Yeah, wow.
And then the
So
day of the
it was a real physical skill that you had to build up the endurance and the speed for.
Yeah, exactly. So there's actually a YouTube video of me which went viral after the event, which shows the actual record attempt
Yeah.
of one-handed clapping. And yeah, so on the day of the festival, I did the attempt and I broke the record. I did 427.
Wow. Congratulations. So
Yes,
cool.
thank you. Yeah. So it was a fun experience for me. So it was
Yeah.
just an idea of trying to break a record and to kind of it's like a journey. It's like when you do, like I said, when you do a marathon for the first time or you do something, a physical endurance test, you train for it, and it's the whole, the kind of like sports movie trope, right? Where
Yeah.
the hero is like sets himself a challenge and tries to
Yeah.
accomplish. And this was one aspect of it. It gave me a lot of joy. It really did. And but then it takes the Guinness World Record Organization several months to kind of review the record, and so it before you know if you actually break it or not, there's months that pass. And I remember I was with you and with two of our no with one of our friends, Shamalia. The three of us were training at the time. We were running in the Alps in
Yeah,
northern Italy, and I remember being on a run in the morning, and all of a sudden my phone goes, and it's a radio station, and this is 9 months after the event.
yeah,
So this is 9 months after that record, and the radio station says, "Well, we saw that you broke this record, and do you want to talk to it in the radio show? We'd like to interview you." I was like, "Oh, okay, okay, sure. What happened?" I realized that Guinness had just put out the video of me breaking the record. They had
yeah,
officially reviewed it, and they had granted me the record, and the video was online. And then I got all these calls. Like this radio station came, and then others came, and I remember being there in the Alps, and I had to kind of be on my phone and do the interview in the evening,
yeah,
and it was fun. And then the video kind of went viral. So I think it had like a couple of 100,000 views, and it generated a lot of media attention. And so this was my 15 minutes of fame, so to speak.
yeah. Good. It's good you've got it out of the way, so you can
Yeah,
relax now.
exactly. Now I can relax. And like the funniest part was I was interviewed in several television shows in my own country in the Netherlands, and then I even got an invitation for a television show in China. So the Chinese got wind of it somehow, and they invited me on the show. And I traveled all the way to China, and they put me up in a nice hotel, and I had to do the record like on their show,
Yeah.
which is the China's most popular TV show. I think it's watched by 30 million people or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, I do have to say it is one of the most outlandish entries I've ever seen onto any TV show before when you came on stage.
Yeah, I showed you the clip where I'm
Yeah.
I'm in the cape, and I'm coming out of a smoke screen, and there's dancers, and I come to the mic, and I do my thing, and
Yeah, you looked slightly like it could have been like some alien being coming
yeah.
to Earth to show his abilities.
But somehow this whole uh because it's such a weird thing and it's such a funny thing, it kind of captures people's attention.
Yeah.
But it's funny how such a small thing that I just did out of giving myself some joy and participating in this event created this whole journey for me, like this whole adventure uh, of showing it, to going to China with it, and being on a few television shows with it, and it was all fun. It was like I felt there was no like false ego inflation about it or something like that. It gave me a lot of joy, the whole
Yeah,
journey.
it's really good because it is those types of things that are like a lot of those records are slightly niche and unique and quirky. So they're not really the type of things that I think people are going to hopefully become too proud and too caught up with the ego about. It's something
Yeah.
that's fun and inspiring for you and the individual. But Sri Chinmoy had a wonderful aphorism, which was individual self-transcendence collectively inspires humanity at large.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So I think that really captures in some way what that whole festival, the Impossibility Challenger festival is about people coming and trying to challenge their own limitations. It wasn't about them trying to compete with others or compete with the world, because very often they're niche events. So it's not like there's a lot of people doing them, but that's not what it's about. It's not about competing with the world. It's about competing with yourself. And all of these things are really hard. Like we've got a friend who's based in our New York center who had the world record for the longest distance doing somersaults, like forward rolls.
Yes.
And what was it like? Didn't he do like? I,
12K.
yeah, and it's like if you've done a few of those, you can start to understand how physically grueling that is. Just doing
Yeah.
somersault, forward roll after forward roll after forward roll. That's just like that. Some of them are incredibly difficult and hard, and when people see them or hear about them, they are really inspiring and they do uplift people.
Yeah.
So, like as you saw with your record,
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons, perhaps, why Sri Chinmoy went into weightlifting, because as we talked about also in an earlier episode, it's something that captures the imagination. It's like this. He was in his 50s, the late 50s when he started, and he continued all the way to when he passed away in 76, in his 76 years of age, and he kept on lifting these incredible amounts of weight.
yeah,
And so it's such an inspiring thing to see this older gentleman lifting these amazing weights. And so it gives a message out like, even if you're in your old age, you can still do great things, amazing things, inspiring things, and you don't have to sit on the couch and be inactive. And also it gave him the opportunity to reach out to a lot of people who otherwise perhaps would not have known about his spiritual side. So the
Yeah.
fact that he also lifted weights and really um, was active in that way, he was able to reach a much larger audience. And
Yeah. And I think one of the things with that and the problems of the media is good things happen very slowly. They happen incrementally. And so the world is becoming more peaceful and more loving and interconnected very, very gradually and very, very slowly. So there's no news story there. So if you're talking about you wanted to go to the media and say, hey, I've got a story that, I've been practicing meditation for many years and it's made me so much more peaceful and more calm and more centered.
yeah,
And, I really feel like I've made progress. It's like, that to them is not a news story. They need
yeah,
something that's dramatic and instantaneous. And
yeah,
so the fact that you you clapped 427 times in 1 minute, that fits the bill. So then
yeah, exactly.
then you've got the opportunity to talk to people and have a voice. And then you can actually talk about, hey, well, why did I do this? What was the reason? What was the intention? What was the thinking behind it? And so it seems a wise approach to things.
And I think ultimately the message of self-transcendence is that we can do much more than we think. So we are very much, if we never accept any challenges, we are always stuck with how our mind views ourselves and the
Yeah.
world, which is a very limited view often, right? So our mind, we very often think of ourselves as being insignificant,
Yeah.
as being just this insignificant one human. What can I do? What can I contribute to the world? But when you go out and you set yourself challenges, there is this whole potential that's being unlocked. And you realize that, hey, I am actually much more than just these limitations that I always thought of myself.
Yeah.
And that is what self transcendence does. It gives the opportunity for you to explore yourself in a much deeper way and to find these avenues, this potential in yourself that you never thought were there. And then at some point you realize, wait a minute, I can do anything that I set my mind to. And
Yeah.
that is often the message of people, right, who have accomplished great things. They say,
Yeah.
you can do anything that you set your mind to. You really have to be focused. And well, let's not say anything. I think it's really hard to fly and things
Yeah.
like that, right? But I mean, the gist of it is that we can do much more than we think. And the things that our mind tells us that are impossible, they're actually quite possible. And
Yeah.
so Sri Chinmoy would always tell us impossibility is just a dictionary word.
Yeah.
Like, don't believe in impossibility. And that's why we call it impossibility challenger. It's like we have to challenge the idea of something being impossible.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll just I've got a little quote here from Sri Chinmoy, and he said, "When I do anything, I have one set goal, and that is my self transcendence." And so that's really interesting. So here you have someone who for me has really attained the highest heights of meditation and really reached those deepest states of consciousness. And then what is he choosing to spend his time aiming towards? It's towards his own self transcendence. And so that's a really interesting concept because, and I think that's something when history looks back on this time and this place that we've lived through, and one thing I always find is really interesting is that we never get to choose our own legacy. So no matter how great you are, or what you think you did, or what you thought you were doing, history will record you in a particular way. It'll pick out certain ideas or certain qualities that you had. And if we look at the teachings of Jesus today, I'm sure they're not 100% aligned with who Jesus was when he was alive. So history has created and picked out certain parts of his teachings and really put those forward as a picture of who he is. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Sri Chinmoy and his teachings and his philosophy is seen in the future. Like what parts of it are going to be most valuable in the future. And for me, it's definitely this idea of self-transcendence because this is really a new idea in the world because Sri Chinmoy comes out of an ancient spiritual tradition. So India has had great spiritual masters for thousands of years. And India really is the home of this deep inquiry into the nature of consciousness and the nature of human potential and the human spirit. So, and there've been particular types of paths that have been popularized from India over thousands of years. But this real idea of embracing the idea of self transcendence is as being fundamental to your spiritual life is something quite revolutionary in some way, and it really fits the time we're living in and the place we're living in. So, as the world becomes more international and interconnected, and people have quite a much more open and broad approach to life. I think and the thing is as well, it's life has become very fast paced and dynamic now. So this idea of self transcendence, I think it's something that will really capture humanity and really inspire people as we move forward in history. And the great thing about Sri Chinmoy's life was this was one of his fundamental teachings. So if we look through all of the poems he's written, I mean, like I collected a selection of them, but it's like there's an infinite variety of poems all about self-transcendence. Like spirituality is a breathless self-transcendence adventure. Self-transcendence is my ever blossoming goal. It's like he came back to this idea again and again to try and inspire people that this is a way that you can really live in the world and really get the most possible joy in your own life, but also uplift humanity. So it's like that idea, your individual self-transcendence inspires um, collectively inspires humanity at large. It's like this is something we can do on a practical level to actually inspire the world around us.
So what could people do in order to practice self-transcendence on a practical level? Like do
Yeah,
you have some suggestions?
yeah. So I totally do. So I just noted a couple of points down that I thought would be useful for people. So we've been talking about this as a concept of self transcendence, like it's an idea. But as we've said before, ideas are only useful when we turn them into tools that we can actually use in our life. So, what are some tools to actually practice this idea of self transcendence? So, first thing, as I always say, is having your own practice. You need to connect with your own inner depths and your own spiritual heights, the deepest, most profound part of you, because that's where you're going to bring forth your self transcendence from. It's not that we're suddenly realizing that we're much stronger than we thought we were, or that we had a lot more physical capacities than we thought we did, because often we've already explored those realms. And like when we're at school or when we're doing sports, we kind of know how good we are at any of those things because we can compare ourselves to others. But what tends to happen, I think, is that if you start to do those physical activities or to do anything in the outer world, but instead of just coming from your mind, which very much is the limited part of your being, and instead you start operating in the world coming from your own spiritual heart and connecting to that infinite consciousness that exists within you, suddenly you start to open doors to potential that you didn't know that didn't know that existed because you'd never connected with it. You'd never spent the time to bring forward those parts of your being. So you need to do the daily practice to connect to that part of your being if you're hoping to start to manifest that in the world. So that's really fundamental.
Yeah, I
But
would say that's the source, right? The source
yeah,
is your spiritual identity and your spiritual practice. And I think spirituality itself is immersed in the idea of self-transcendence. Transcendence, that is for me a spiritual concept. It's like going beyond, expanding.
yeah.
So yeah, exactly. That comes from your own spiritual source.
And so there's a lovely idea that whatever your attainment on any particular day, when you ever have your best possible meditation or you enter into your highest possible state of consciousness, that simply becomes the starting point for tomorrow's journey. So it's an ever transcending journey. So you're always moving forwards and you're always moving upwards. You're always making progress. And so, that the progress is actually a really key word, I think, in this idea. So I've got this idea that I put together that um, progress is self transcendence, and self transcendence is perfection. And so Sri Chinmoy talked about this a
Yours
lot.
or sorry, this is yours or Sri Chinmoy's?
So this is based on some of Sri Chinmoy's speaking about this
Okay.
idea. Um,
Yeah.
so so if we're aiming for perfection in this world, as we've talked before, when we had our episode where we talked about the success-based lifestyle, like aiming for success, and we talked about success being a momentary state. So we're aiming for success in our examination, we're aiming for success in our sporting event, we're aiming for success with our bank account or whatever it is. We're aiming for some arbitrary point in time and space. And the problem with that is that we're living in an evolving, progressive universe that's constantly transcending itself. So as soon as we get to that point, if we think we can rest there, the universe has already moved on from there. And so we talked about the progress based lifestyle, focusing on your own progress instead of focusing on a momentary state of success. And so, if we were talking about perfection in the universe, if you're living in a universe that's constantly moving forward and evolving, like what does perfection, how can you have perfection? Because whatever you say, okay, this moment is perfection, like you can always go one step beyond that. It doesn't matter what your achievement is. It's like you say, oh, this was the perfect day. Then what happens with the rest of your life? It's like you have to keep moving forward. And actually, this is really interesting. I'm not sure if you know this, but we live in an expanding universe. It said so. The universe is constantly expanding. So it started off at one point, at some 13.8 billion years ago, and it started expanding. And so people thought for the longest time that it would expand at a constant rate. So everything started expanding and moving apart, and that would continue at that rate forever. But what they've discovered more recently is that it's actually accelerating. So things are now moving apart faster and faster. So it's expanding in this shape here. So now things that are far away from us are moving away from us at faster than the speed of light. So even if we could move at the speed of light, we could never reach the edge of the universe because the universe is expanding faster than we could ever possibly move towards it. And so it really blows my mind. It's like, wow, this is like such an expansionary universe. And so I want to see that modeled. I want to see that mapped in our being as well. I want to feel as though that I'm an expanding being. And so for me, the only real state of perfection in this universe is in my self-transcendence, is in progress. So when I'm moving forward and progressing, that is actually perfection. So perfection is not a static point. It's not an arbitrary thing that you're aiming at. It's a constantly evolving, constantly moving, constantly transcending energy. And that's really, really perfection. Sri Chinmoy talked about it really nicely. He said that your perfection and my perfection, if we aimed for them, if we talked about them, they'd be two totally different things. And so the
Mm,
only thing that we can really agree upon being perfect is progress. Is when you're making progress and you're getting joy from that, that's perfection. When the other person, when they're making progress and they're getting joy from that, that's their perfection.
yeah.
So perfection is not something that we can aim for in a physical, material sense. It's something that is happening within us with this expansion.
Yeah, and Sri Chinmoy also said that God is transcending himself, herself all the time.
Yeah.
Like the Supreme is constantly transcending himself. And um, the Saint Teresa of Avila, a middle-aged saint, she said, "It appears that the Lord himself is on the journey."
Oh, what a beautiful comment. But that's right, because if God or the infinite consciousness itself was static, it would no longer be infinite. It would no longer be truly, the highest, most
Yeah,
transcendent
right.
consciousness, because something could have gone beyond it. So it needs to
Yeah.
constantly be going beyond itself. And so
Yes.
self-transcendence is a way to act out that urge to play that role here in a physical form in the material world.
Yeah,
So
and it's interesting that this planet itself has this tremendous inner urge. Several spiritual masters have commented that the Earth has a tremendous urge of going beyond, of
yeah.
transcending, and that's this planet is that's is basically its unique selling point almost. It's
Yeah.
like the urge of transcendence.
Yeah, and you look at the life here, it started off incredibly simple microbes and bacterias and, very small, very simple single-celled organisms. And then, look where it's gone to. It's just gone more and more and more and more complexity. And
Yeah,
And who knows what we're going to evolve into over time as well. It's like it's not a static process. It's a constantly moving evolutionary process. And I think
Yeah.
that's nice for people, because people see evolution happening in the material world. They can see, okay, these animals seem to have gone from this form and changed and transformed and become more complex and more evolved. And if you look at the universe like that, you want to see that urge that's acting out in life itself, you want that to be part of the bigger picture. If you saw God as some static being that created the universe and he was unchanging, it would not it would be out of alignment with the type of creation that he has made, because you want to see the creation and the creator in some way having a shared set of qualities, or a shared ethos towards life. So,
Yes,
so I think
absolutely.
that's really nice to see. So I've got a couple of other points to talk about around self-transcendence. So one of them is aspiration. So I think self-transcendence and aspiration are really tightly bound together. And so we've talked
So
about,
what is aspiration?
so
Tell.
aspiration is, I was thinking about that because I knew you might ask me that question. So I wanted to be prepared for that. So
I've
what,
heard this. I've heard it so many times. This word aspiration. Tell me
yeah, I
what it
mean, people
is.
just throw it out as though it's
Yeah.
something like, oh, how's your aspiration going? Have you got some aspiration at the moment? So, so what aspiration for me is the embodied yearning for progress. So we know that we're not all that we can be. We know we need to grow. We know we need to become better than we are now, because we can see that we're not enough. Like, because the world is constantly moving forward, so we need to constantly move forward to keep up with it. And so there's this yearning with us to grow and to become better than we are. And when we really embody that and start living it out, I call that, I would say that's what aspiration is. It's we're aspiring to be the best possible version of ourselves. We're aspiring to transcend.
It's an
And
inner
so,
cry, right? An inner
yeah,
longing, a yearning.
and it's not theoretical. It's not an abstract thing. It's like very much embodied. Like when you feel aspiration in you, it drives you. It's like an energy that's pushing you forward. It's something that lifts you up, and it gives you capacity. It gives you more ability or more capacity than you thought you had available. So when you see someone who's really inspired, or really aspiring towards something, they're willing to give absolutely everything for that. They're willing to give all their time, all of their energy, everything that they've got. They're willing to give, because they can feel that this, it's not that they're wanting to get somewhere as well. It's like when we talked about patience. As patience, the goal wants you to achieve the goal. And I feel like that with aspiration. It's like there's something in front of you and it's pulling you towards it. Like you want to become more than you are, but it also wants to manifest itself through you. Like the best possible version of yourself wants to see itself, wants to be manifest here on earth. So aspiration is really key. And if you can have and develop your own aspiration, and a lot of that comes through your own spiritual practice, but it's also having a vision of the betterment of yourself and being of service to the world. I think when you're only doing things just for the limited you, it's really easy to give up. It's like if you're just doing it for you, you can think, well, who really cares? When someone's trying some difficult, obscure record, I remember, what was one of Shrita's famous ones, like walking with a milk bottle balanced on his head.
Yes,
For
that's
the
one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like these things that take so long, and you could easily think, does anyone else really care? It's like, if I just stop now, is anyone really gonna is it really gonna matter to anyone? But there's this part of you, this aspiration that wants to see you bring your best self, your best qualities, bring the deepest and most profound parts of you into being here in the world. And and and, and it's that idea that you're not doing it just for yourself, though, that you're doing it for humanity. Because the thing is, that's really all you have control over. If you want to make the world better, don't go out into the world and stand on the streets and shout at people and block the roads. It's like the most powerful thing you can do, and the one thing you truly have control over, is yourself. So if you see imperfections in the world, it's probably mirroring imperfections you're seeing in yourself. So if you can transform yourself and make progress, that's the one way you have access to transforming humanity and helping lift up humanity.
Yeah, you can never really change other people. You can only change yourself.
Yeah,
That's the only person you can actually change
yeah.
is
So
yourself.
so that's really important. And then
It's service to the world and aspiration.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and then the other quality that I think is really tightly connected with self transcendence is self giving, because
Yes.
I think so much of self transcendence is in our self giving. It's in giving ourselves fully to the experience of life and giving ourselves fully to whatever activity it is that we're undertaking, and doing it not for our own aggrandizement. We're not trying to prove that we're the best one hand clapper in the world, or that we can rip the most phone books in half. We're trying to offer the best of um, the highest possible qualities that we have access to the world. We're not trying to hold on to them. We're trying to give them to the world. So when you're trying to practice a life of self transcendence, it doesn't have to be in something physical. And you touched on that. It doesn't have to be that we have to go out there and run hundreds of miles, or do more physically than we've done before, because we can practice self transcendence in the amount of love that we offer into the world. We can do it with the generosity. We can do it with our empathy. We can do it with our compassion or with our kindness.
But would you say that anytime that you do, you give you give or you act with kindness, you should try to do it more than the last time? Is that the transcendent quality?
Yeah, you want to show more of that quality, because all of the good qualities in the world exist in infinite measure. So it's like love. It's like if I offer my love to the world, I don't find myself lacking in love. I find more love within myself. It's like there's an infinite supply of it, and the more I give, the more I'll find that I have myself.
Yeah, that's interesting between the difference between material objects and spiritual objects, that material objects disappear when you give them away.
Yeah,
Spiritual qualities increase when you give them away.
yeah. So
They truly do.
I have a little experience that happened to me last week that maybe touches on this for me personally. So let's see if that resonates at all. And so last week I got a phone call from a lady, and she said she had some musical instruments that she wanted me to have a look at. And so I said, okay, please come down, and I'm happy to have a look at them. And she said she'd been to some other musical stores and they didn't really know what they were or what to do with them. So she came down and she had them in her car. So I came out into our car park, and I went and had a look at them. And she was an older lady, perhaps in her 60s, and she opened up her boot of her trunk of her car, and she had some musical instruments. And normally, if someone has secondhand musical instruments, they're not really that beautiful, or the quality's not normally that good. Like we have beautiful instruments in our store, and so they have to sort of meet a sort of certain standard for us to be able to sell them for people, to people. And so she opened up the back of her car, and she showed me this one drum. And as soon as I saw it, it was this beautiful Irish bellron, and it was handmade and was like relatively old, but it was really something really special and beautiful about it. And looking around the instruments she had Turkish darbukas, and she had African djembes, and there was this beautiful selection of world instruments, like percussion instruments. And I was really taken by them, and I could see and tell that there was something important going on for this lady. And so I was treating it, taking it very seriously. And she said that all of these had belonged to her sister, all of these instruments, and that her sister was a great lover of music and a great lover of percussion, and she had traveled all over the world and played at different festivals, and she had spent a lot of her life collecting these beautiful instruments. And her sister now had passed away, and so they'd ended up in her hands. And so I took it as this very solemn, I took it very seriously, because these were treasured possessions of her beloved sister. So I said to her, we would be really honored if we could sell these through our shop, because musical instruments are living beings in some ways. So they only exist when they're played. They only come to life when you use them and play on them. And if they just sit around as though they're some sort of object, they lose all of their life energy. And so I could see that these instruments had been sitting around for far too long. And she could tell that as well. She could tell that these instruments were just slowly dying, just having them sitting around in her house. And they were causing her some feeling of grief and sorrow, because every time she saw them, they'd remind her of her sister and the loss that she'd faced. And so she wanted to think about it. So she went away, and then she came back several hours later and she said, "Look, I think I can trust you. I can entrust these instruments to you." Because I really made it clear that what we look to do is we try and find someone who will love this instrument in the way that your sister loved it. That these are beautiful things and they need to be used and played. And they're really wasting away just being, unplayed and sitting in your house. And so she surrendered them all to me. And so I took them into the store and, I spent several hours cleaning them and polishing them and getting them ready to sell. And then I just got this really strong feeling, this like inner feeling that I should do something with them for her. And so I got my friend Granantan to come in, and in the store, I set them all up and I played on each of the instruments, and I played a traditional rhythm from some of the different parts of the world. So I played some Middle Eastern rhythms on the Middle Eastern drums. I played some African rhythms. I played something on the cajon. I played the bowron, and I got him to film all of those. And it was almost in some way as I was letting the spirit of her beloved sister, or the spirit of the instruments, like come alive again. And so I recorded all of these and I sent them to this lady. And almost immediately I got this really strong heart feeling, like this really just beautiful heart feeling that I had done something of service to someone else that was really incredibly valuable, because there was a lot of grief and sadness caught up and tangled up with all of these things. And in some ways, I was able, by sending her those videos, and for her to see those things now being loved and being played and being out there in the world again, doing what they were meant to do. It was in some way a great closure, or a way of letting go of that grief and the connection to those things. And she wrote me a message back, just thanking me so much for what I did and for my kindness, and just really thanking me for being of service to her in some way in that moment. But it was such a beautiful thing, because it wasn't something that I needed to do. There was nothing in it for me doing that. Like, that didn't help me sell the instruments, or it didn't. I didn't need to do it. But it was the opportunity to be self-giving and to serve someone else, and to play a role in their life that would help them in some way, is just such a valuable experience. And in some ways, it was self-transcendence for me, because if you'd met me 10, 15, 20, let's say 25 years ago when I started my spiritual practice, I was a young man who didn't really know the meaning of true self-giving. And so to see myself now acting in a way that I see as admirable, like if the younger me had seen me acting like that, I think he would have been inspired. He would have thought, wow, like you've really grown and transformed yourself. And so for me, that was like a little moment of transcendence, where it's not something that anyone else would notice, but for me, it was something personal and beautiful, and it was
Yeah,
transformative.
beautiful experience. Yeah, I can really see how that ties into the theme of transcendence. And uh, I also wondered, what is the difference between physical transcendence and spiritual transcendence? Because I guess when we say, how can people practice self-transcendence in a very practical way? One thing I would suggest is do something physically challenging,
Yeah.
like taking up running, or swimming or biking, or any sport related activity, and trying to better yourself in that. And
Yeah.
better yourself means maybe go out for longer runs over time, and start out simple and kind of like increase your capacity, or do a weight training regime where you kind of try to increase your fitness in the gym, or by swimming and becoming a better swimmer, or by learning an instrument. Like you can take up a new instrument,
Yeah,
and
that's a good one.
you know that's a really good one to become fluent at, or at least to become capable of playing an instrument. That's also a journey of self-transcendence. Or learning a new language. Many people like to learn different languages, which is also a form of transcendence. You becoming better at something. um So that's a very practical way of how you can enter into a transcendent activity. And it should be something that gives you some inspiration from the
Yeah,
beginning, right? It should give you some joy, something like, yeah, that's really what I would like to do. It could be related to art, like drawing or painting. And I think also art is a real expression of the soul. So if you talk about activities that really please the deeper part of our being, it's like these kind of things, art, but also sports, music, poetry. You can write something, you can write a poem, for instance, and transcend yourself in those ways. And but then there's also the other side, which is the spiritual transcendence, which you
yeah,
talked about by developing a practice, right? So I mean, you and me, we sit down every morning for our shrine, we do our meditation, and there also we hope to transcend ourselves. But there, it's almost like we're not really in control, right? This is something that kind of happens through you when you meditate. Like sometimes you reach a higher level, and sometimes it just happens during the day when you feel in a very uplifting spiritual mood where you're suddenly flooded with a feeling of joy or bliss or peace, which can descend upon you. And that is also part of this transcendence, but it's more of a spiritual nature.
yeah. And that for me is such a beautiful part of my life. It's this ongoing journey of self-transcendence that's completely personal and completely my own, that the world doesn't need to see. They're like, these experiences are for you and for you alone. And when you have your deepest or most profound spiritual experiences through your practice and through your meditation, or when you're walking, they're so unique and so beautiful, and so well crafted to fit who you are and what you need at that particular moment. That's something that I cherish so much. And I'm so grateful for each time I have one of those experiences. And it's really interesting. Sri Chinmoy had a really interesting philosophy around that. I know we've talked about time a lot in some of the previous episodes, but Sri Chinmoy had an interesting take on that, where he said that if you're not feeling inspired now, if you have had some of those moments in the past, if you can really dive into your best possible experience you had in the past, if you can really bring it to the fore, if you can really try and remember it as deeply and as um, profoundly as possible, that can actually help you in the present moment. So trying to reconnect with those moments where you were in your best possible consciousness can actually lift you up in the here and now. So it's like there's no gap in the true spiritual sense, and like over space and time. You can actually bring those moments back to the fore just simply by trying to bring them into your consciousness as powerfully as possible. And so I think that's a really interesting shortcut if we've been struggling, or if we're finding things hard at that moment, to try and remember our most beautiful memories of some of those spiritual experiences.
Yeah, so the spiritual master Swami Vivekananda used to do that when he had dry spells in his meditation. So even really advanced yogis and masters have dry spells sometimes in their meditation. So you've been meditating and all of a sudden you hit a dry spell and it seems like nothing, you don't reach your own usual heights or depths in your meditation. It seems all like a dry desert. And at those times, he used to remember his highest meditations. So, like you said, he would vividly imagine the times where he had wonderful, deep meditations. And just by imagining them, he'd be able to bring himself back. So he said it was like a ladder that he used to climb back up to his previous height.
Yeah,
And so imagination in that way can really work to bring us back to those more fruitful times in our spiritual life.
yeah. And I think the final area of self transcendence that we haven't looked at. So we've looked at self transcendence in the outer world, and then we've through the world of activity, let's say, through the world of doing, and then we've got the self transcendence in our inner yearning, in our practice as well, where we're seeking to have higher and more profound experiences. But then there's also the self transcendence in the type of way that I was talking about in that experience, where you're transcending yourself in your ability to share kindness and love with others. You're expanding yourself in your ability to hold um, generosity, and to live a life of abundance, or to live a life of real aspiration. And so that's probably the more difficult one for people to really put their fingers on, because obviously you can easily measure your progress in a physical sense. You can see if you're better at a language or better at a musical instrument or better at your sport. And when you practice your meditation, you know what your meditations are regularly like. And so if you have one out of the ordinary, you do notice those things. But I think the real connecting link between the practice of meditation and living a true divine life is bringing your full awareness into your day-to-day activities. And I think often that's the point where people fall down with their practice, where they do the practice and they think the practice is somehow separate from their day-to-day life. So they sit down, they do their 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 1 hour of meditation in the morning, and then they go into the hustle and bustle of life. And they don't bring that deeper states of awareness that they develop. They don't have a connecting link between their day-to-day activities and the states of consciousness they experience in their meditation. And so that might be as simple as they get in the car and, they put on the radio. And so, they're already getting caught up in the stories of the day. And then you're driving along and someone cuts you off in traffic and you get irate and you start, you start offering them ill will, and you start to forget that you are all of these people. You are the universe, and everything is here as a lesson and a teacher for you. And so trying to bring that that deeper spiritual part of your being and live a life from that place, that really becomes the most profound. That's perhaps the hardest part of the path, but it's also the most interesting. When you can start to create space in your life to make choices that really align with your deepest values, and when you start to act out qualities that you didn't know that you had, when you start to just being spontaneously self-giving to someone else in a way
Yeah.
that you didn't think that you were capable of, or a bit spontaneously compassionate and loving to someone, completely without attachment, without needing anything in return. When you start to see that happening, you start to find the day-to-day activities of life incredibly meaningful.
Yeah, and I remember when you spoke about how to kind of synthesize the two worlds, the world of your practice, the inner world, and then your day-to-day life, the outer world. And I would say if to people who are starting on their practice that takes some time.
Yeah.
So I remember also from when I started, I found it very frustrating that I had these wonderful kind of deep feelings and experiences in my meditation. I would feel this peace and I would feel this quiet and really centeredness. But then when I would go into the daily life of the university where I studied at the time, I would feel that I lost that kind of sense of self-control, and I kind of was caught up in the, all the dealings of the world, and the mind kind of takes over.
Yeah.
But I would say that just takes time. Like you
Yeah.
need to continue with your practice, and there will come a time when those two worlds will kind of like shift and blend and synthesize and harmonize. So then at some point the outer world will start to kind of mold, and it will grow into a complete alignment with your inner world.
Yeah.
So don't give up if you have this experience where you're frustrated about how those two are not separate, are separate from each other. They will definitely come into more harmony as you continue with your practice.
Beautiful. Well said. And yeah, I mean, because that's really the aim of this channel, is to really inspire people and give them practical tools to actually put these ancient ideas or these spiritual ideas into practice in their day-to-day lives. So we've been trying to do this in our own lives, in our own practice for 25 years plus. So we're a little bit, we may be one or two steps ahead of some people. And so Sri Chinmoy often said that the best way you can inspire people, or sometimes people don't need the great spiritual master, someone who's thousands of miles away from them. They sometimes just need a friend who's one or two steps ahead of them. And so that person you can often relate to a lot more easily. And so hopefully for some of you who are out there who have started your own practice or inspired with your own practice, we can give a little bit of inspiration to say, hey, it is worth it. The journey is richly rewarding. And the joy that you get from these developing your own consciousness to bring forward your own best self into this world is so fulfilling, and it's totally in alignment with the type of universe we're living in. And so we're not negating anything, we're not trying to run away from the harsh realities of life. I think really at the deepest level, spirituality is the embracing of the truest form of the universe, and not getting caught up with the maya or the illusion of the material world, and instead seeing the more subtle essence of this universe. And we're trying to align ourselves with that part of the universe. And when you do it, and when you live from that place, the universe becomes a wondrous place to exist in, full of experiences and full of rich majesty and beauty. And it can be in the smallest things. And actually, I had a realization. So I want to share this because we've talked about the divine Leela, the divine play, in previous episodes. And so it's one of the different models of the universe you could have. But I was
Right.
thinking about plays, and I was thinking about, in a play, there is no ordinary scenes. There's no irrelevant scenes in a play. So when a play is well written, every single scene has a purpose and has meaning and carries the story forward. And so when we look at our own lives, that's often not how we see our lives. We see our lives as these important moments filled by a whole bunch of filler material. It's like, oh, so I've got something good happening this weekend, but between now and then, it's just a whole bunch of B-roll filler material.
Yeah.
That's what we tend to take it as. But I realize, no, that's the wrong approach to things. It's every scene in the cosmic drama. Every scene has information for you. Every scene develops the character. Every scene, and some scenes you're not the main character. It may be that you're having an interaction, and at that moment, it's the other character's scene. It's they're the star at that scene. So, but you need to be there to play off against them. That they need the relationship to
Yes.
for that scene to
Yeah,
happen.
there's no such thing as an insignificant moment in the cosmic drama. I
No,
mean, all
exactly.
events are significant. All
Yeah,
acts are significant. I
yeah,
truly underscribe that. I just started watching a series yesterday.
yeah.
It's called Severance. Have you heard of it?
No,
So here's the idea that people, it's kind of a sci-fi idea that when they go to work, they have this really boring job. They're in a cubicle, they're punching numbers, and so they have signed this contract where they will not have any when they go into their work office, they go to some kind of brain procedure that they will not remember their experiences from their personal life,
yeah,
and then when they're at work, they will not remember anything. They're just like off. They're kind
yeah.
of like off, and when they get back from work, they will not remember anything that they did at work, and they
Oh,
will
wow.
continue with their own lives. So it's
Yeah,
like this idea of, oh, there's so much like filler time, boring
yeah,
time that we just want to switch off. You
yeah,
just want to switch off. And I wish this working day of 8 hours would just like go by like that. And I've had no memory of it because it's just so boring and soul numbing.
yeah.
But what to do if you happen to be in a job like that and you do want to craft meaning from your life
Yeah.
and you do
Well,
want to practice this idea of self?
I've got an example. So to get here, I'm currently now in New York City, and we're preparing for meditation celebrations, which happens every
I will
April.
join you there next week.
Yes, so
We'll do our podcast from there.
I look forward to that. And so, but to get here to New York, I've got to leave from Christchurch. I've got to fly to Auckland, and then from Auckland, it's a 15 or 16-hour flight direct to JFK here in New York. And so you could think that 15 or 16 hours on the plane, you think, oh God, like this is going to be an eternity, and it's going to be awful, and what am I going to do? And it's going to just be some sort of torturous experience, being crammed in this place where you've got no privacy and you've got no space. And I found the plane ride so richly interesting and rewarding that you would not believe. Because I took it as though every moment and everything that was happening on that plane was a really interesting scene in the play of
So,
my
so
life.
were you doing some were you supporting actor for some scenes with
Oh,
other?
yeah, definitely. There was a lovely Irish lady who she started talking to me late in the flight, and I could barely understand a word she was saying. But she was wanting to tell me all of the stuff about her time in New Zealand and her son, but her accent was so strong that I really, out of a whole sentence, I could catch like 4 or 5 words. So I just had to like try and feel as though what is this woman wanting? Like, what is really going on here? So I was trying to be of some deep inner service. And the
Yeah.
words were just like this beautiful, it was this beautiful babbling brook of a stream just washing over me. And I was enjoying our conversation so much, although I had no idea what it was about at times.
No, your job was just to nod and smile and
Yeah.
just give her a feeling that she was being heard.
And so this was a wonderful thing. And there's this great series of events where when you're a vegetarian, as I am, sometimes you have these wonderful moments on the plane where I had ordered a special vegetarian meal. So they bring out the special meals, and everyone else gets theirs, and I look around, and there's none for me. So I talked to the steward, and I told him, oh, I ordered a vegetarian meal, but it does for some reason it has not arrived. And he said, oh, okay, no, that's totally fine. I'll try and sort something out for you. So he went off and he looked down in the economy, and there was no vegetarian meals. And so it was just it turned out to be such a beautiful interaction. He was a young guy. I think he was part Maori, so he's a young New Zealand guy. So he went down into business class, and down there they've actually got a kitchen and they can make food. And so he comes back and he says, "I'm really sorry, like we've run out of there's no vegetarian meals, but what I can do is I can get them to make you a special meal down in business class." And so it ends up being this huge palaver where this huge drama where they start bringing me all of these plates, and these are not your standard, these are proper like ceramic plates, and he's bringing me out this big bowl of salad, and he's bringing me this cheese platter, and I've got all this lovely bread, and I can see the people around me all looking and thinking, my God, like what is going on here? Because this is totally different to what's happening for everyone else with their economy class meals. And then um throughout the whole flight, they kept on coming back to me. Oh, sir, we know there was some problem with your meal, but have you had enough to eat now? And there was so much love and concern that I was just so overwhelmed by the whole kindness of other people. Because I wasn't demanding, like, if there was nothing for me, I was totally accepting of the whole thing. I'm like it's totally fine. Like if the meal didn't come on board, like it's not your fault. It's no problem to me. But just seeing this kindness of strangers being acted out and this level of service was really heartwarming, the whole thing.
Lovely. Super. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the 3,100-mile
Oh,
race,
good.
because that is, I think, when we talk about self-transcendence, that is one of the most eye-catching things that I guess, that we have to offer on our path,
Yeah,
that
it's
that
iconic.
show this idea, a very iconic.
Yeah.
So the Self-Transcendence 3,100-mile race, for those of you who have never heard of it, is the longest certified running race in the world, and it is 3,100 miles, which is almost 5,000 kilometers, which means that this race takes a lot of time. The cutoff is 52 days, which, if you do some quick math, means that you have to run almost 100 kilometers every
Yeah.
day in order to finish this race. And so the exact number is 96 kilometers they have to run. And the course is also iconic because it is very close to where you are right now. It's a block in Jamaica, Queens,
Yeah.
in New York.
I was
It's a
actually running
cement.
around it this morning.
There you go. Yeah, it's a cement city block of 800 meters, and it's around a public school. And so imagine that they have to run 5,000 kilometers around an 800-meter block. So they have to run that more than 5,000 times, obviously. And they have to be on the course from 6 a.m. in the morning until midnight. And so they have to actually sleep. They have to go home at midnight is the cutoff. Then they actually sleep every night a few hours wherever they're staying. And some of them have been staying in our house here, which is actually almost on the course where you are right now. And then at 6 a.m., they have to be back at the starting line or they will be disqualified. So they have to be back at 6 a.m. to start. And this is such a mind-blowing event. If you hear about it, you're like, nobody can ever complete that. Yet every year there's about 12, 13 participants usually. Most of them are students of Sri Chinmoy. Sometimes there will be the people from outside, as we call it, that come in and have heard about the race, ultra runners. There's quite a few now who've also participated and have done really well. But I would say that most people practice some form of meditation just to deal with the extremities of the race, because this race is extreme in every sense of the word, right? It's like the
Yeah.
concrete pavement that you run on the surface, the relentless miles and miles. And well, it used to be held in the summer months. Now they moved it more to the in September, October, November. It's now being held, which is a little bit milder. But then you have rain, you have the climate. New York can be very harsh in terms of climate.
Yeah.
And I mean, runners go through like 10, 12 pairs of shoes during the race because obviously they wear out. And they go through sometimes injuries, small injuries, blisters, and they have to kind of deal with it on the run. They can't really stop running because if you stop running, you don't finish.
Yeah. Even sometimes severe injuries people are dealing
Yes.
with out there.
Shin splints is a very common one, right? And Achilles problems. And what people, I mean, I know several people who have finished that race, and people say that during the race, there's a special kind of energy that comes down that kind of transforms that's kind of like almost heals the injuries while they are going through them. So sometimes they have to walk. They can't really run, but they can still walk. And they're walking and they're going through this, and this injury just disappears after a few days. And a very good friend of mine, Pradeep from The Hague, has done the race and finished the race in 2011. And he also participated in it in 2012. Didn't quite finish, but made it a very far along. And what he told me was so interesting. He said, like, the longer he was running the race, the fitter he became, like the more energy he got, which is totally counterintuitive because you'd think that, you get more and more tired and tired and tired until you're
Yeah.
like almost dead. But he said the beginning is the hardest because you have to remember after day one, you're already smashed and destroyed. You've run
Yeah.
100K. Anyone who's run 100K, you're very tired at the end of a 100K race.
Yeah.
This is just day one. So after day one, you've run 100K. Next day, you wake up 6 a.m., you're at the starting line. You have to do it again. And guess what? The next day, you have to do it again. And he said the beginning weeks were like so hard and so physically draining. And he was getting more and more tired. And he thought to himself, how can I ever finish this race? Like it's impossible. I'm getting more and more tired. It's also painful. There's of course the physical pain of the pounding and the running. But then he said, it's like your body goes through this spiritual door. It's kind of coming into a new phase. It's getting new, it's like downloading new energy. And this is what happened, he said. After like 3 weeks, you come into a new phase where you're kind of almost reborn in a sense, and you're able to deal with the pain. It's like a little drone in the background, but it's not as assaulting anymore. And then he said this, then you have another period where you just get more and more tired. He said in the beginning, it's more the pain. Then it becomes kind of like the tiredness, and it becomes like really tired. And you think like, oh, this is not, I'm never going to be able to continue. But then when you go through that, boom, again, a switch is flicked and the tiredness disappears. And he said, like the last week or the last 2 or 3 weeks of the race, he felt that he could go on forever. He felt so good. And also, when I see pictures of him in the near end stages of the race, he looks fresh and happy, and he looks like he just started the race. So, this incredible thing happens in this race where if you do it right, like you can, first of all, you can accomplish it. Like people finish this amazing event, they finish 5,000 kilometers of running, but then also you become totally fit and healthy and happy. And so at the end of the race, I mean, for sure they're going to be tired and everything like that when the race is actually over. But there's this very interesting process that takes place where you kind of, I think you're downloading, or your body is able to process so much cosmic energy during this race.
Yeah.
And so you and I have talked about the race. Of course, it's a big event in our center, and it's taking place every year here in New York. And yeah, there's a lot of respect that we have for people who've run the race. I mean, you and I are runners, and you are also an ultra runner, but we haven't done this race ourselves. What is
No,
your
and a
feeling
lot. I
about?
mean, that's definitely in the running community. That's really what the Sri Chinmoy group is known for. Is our races, and all of our races are called self-transcendence races. And so we have races around the world each year. We have them in Christchurch. We have them in Amsterdam, and that's yeah, it's really that philosophy that we're trying to offer to the communities in the different parts of the world. And so that's really kind of the pinnacle, we could say, of our races that we put on. It's the most challenging, it's the most difficult, and a lot of the hardship is almost necessary to. It's like that pressure that creates the diamonds that we've talked about. That you need the pressure of being out there, and it's an inhospitable place. It's like gritty and raw. It's like New York City. It's not beautiful. There's like an ugliness and a rawness to the city and to this place here. But that's part of the lesson, because it's, if you can find meaning and beauty in the heart of this gritty, tough, hard place, it shows you that it exists everywhere. If we all only lived in South India in this balmy climate, and lived by a beautiful beach, or we lived up in near Haridwar or Rishikesh in the foothills of the Himalayas, and we
Or in Bali,
yeah, so
Indonesia.
we had a beautiful environment around us. A lot of people would say, "Oh, well, it's easy for you to say, like, I live in a big city, how am I supposed to find peace of mind, or how am I supposed to find beauty and joy in my life?" But I think that was part of the reason why Sri Chinmoy chose New York City to come to, because in some ways it feels like the capital of the world. Because, like, I was out running yesterday in Central Park, and I would have heard at least 30 different languages being spoken, and you see people from all parts of the world here. You've got people from Europe, you've got people from Asia, you've got people from South America, you've got just anyone from anywhere who's
Hey,
trying
hey,
to.
we have that in Amsterdam, man.
Yeah.
Don't rule us out. We have a lot of nationalities.
Yeah, but New York as well, there's something really harsh and gritty and real about this place. It's like no one's going to give you a handout in New York City. It's like there's something so.
Every time I go to New York and I'm on the bus, I get this culture shock because I come from such a curated country in a way. The
Yeah,
Netherlands, everything is so planned out and neat and taken care of. And then I go to New York and it's like, boom,
yeah,
everything is, like you say, tough. There's like the streets, it's a tough environment. And
yeah.
like the water,
Even
even showering, the water is hard on your body. It's like, oh, really
Even when you fly in, like I've flown to JFK Airport, it's a bit ugly and gritty and run down, and they're putting a lot of money into trying to do it up, but it's still going to be a little bit gritty and run down. And the first experience you always have is you end up in some immigration queue, and it takes for some reason 2 hours. So you're there, and there's
yeah.
always some attendants shouting at people, just like
Yes.
So you get this experience where it's almost like they're testing, like, how much do you really? You think you're tough? Okay, you think you're really tough? Like, welcome to New York.
And that's why Frank Sinatra is saying, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere.
Yeah,
By the way, for those people listening in New York, we love New York. We
yeah.
come there twice a year already for 20 years. We love the place. Really,
And,
really do.
and so that's part of the lesson, that if you can come here and have deep spiritual experiences, you've got no excuses. Like, if Sri Chinmoy could come here and found a spiritual center based in New York City, and he could teach people to practice really the most deepest and profound forms of meditation and transformation of consciousness, and they could do it here in this city, then it shows you, like, no one's got any excuses anywhere in the world, because, like you said, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. So
I didn't say that. Frank Sinatra. Just to get it right. Yeah, but well said. I love that. I love that. That's really true. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe that's a beautiful point to close our conversation
Yep,
for today
I think that's the end.
about self-transcendence. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, dear listeners and viewers. And if you like our podcast, please consider subscribing. We really appreciate it if you can leave a comment or a review or tell a friend about our podcast, because we do want to reach more people. We love these conversations. We'll keep doing them. And next week we will both be in New York. I'll be right there in that room with you, and we'll do some podcasting there.
Wonderful.
So check us out next week.